All right, let's talk about something that should be on every corporate leader's radar right now: artificial intelligence and the law. We're going to break down some of the critical legal risks, all based on a new report from Virtualization Options LLC. And if you're in a leadership role, trust me, this is something you really can't afford to ignore. Okay, first things first, a quick but really important heads up. What we're about to discuss is for informational purposes only. This is not legal advice. For any specific concerns, you absolutely should be talking to your corporate counsel or a personal attorney who's up to speed on these issues. So, let's just cut right to the chase with the big question. Could your company's AI actually land you in court? For leaders in today's world, this question is becoming more urgent than ever. The decisions you're making about AI today are going to define your legal exposure tomorrow. So check out this number: 473.5%. What on earth is that? Well, that is the staggering increase in Fortune 500 companies that are now flagging AI as a material risk factor in their regulatory filings just this year. That's not just a small trend, that is a massive signal that the ground has fundamentally shifted. And that huge jump really points to one central problem. AI has officially moved from being just a cool opportunity for innovation to a major source of potential liability. The game has absolutely changed. And here's the heart of the issue, right? The technology, it's just moving at lightning speed. Companies are rushing to deploy these incredibly powerful AI systems, but their ability to put the right controls and oversight in place, well, it just hasn't kept up. There's a huge gap. And this is where it gets personal. We're not just talking about the company getting slapped with a fine anymore. We are talking about legal exposure that extends directly to directors and officers, personally. The choices being made in that boardroom now have real individual consequences. So how does that work? Well, it starts with something called the fiduciary duty of care. In plain English, what that really means is you can't just stick your head in the sand. You have an obligation to be informed, to ask the tough questions, and to truly understand the risks and opportunities of the AI your company is using. And right alongside that, you've got the duty of loyalty. This is all about making sure that any AI you deploy is actually serving the company's best interests. Not just chasing the latest tech trend without thinking about the long-term impact. Okay, so how does this actually play out in a courtroom? Well, take a look. We're seeing shareholder lawsuits pop up specifically for failures in AI oversight. If you ignore red flags, like customer complaints about bias, or you fail to set up proper monitoring systems, you could be held personally responsible. And maybe the most important part? The old excuse of, oh, this tech is just too complicated for me to understand, well, that's not flying anymore.
So if that's the framework, what are the actual threats you need to be watching out for? Let's break down the big three that are really dominating the legal landscape right now.
They really fall into three main buckets. First, what's being called AI washing, basically misrepresentation. Second, a massive one, algorithmic bias and discrimination. And third, something we're all familiar with but is now on steroids, data privacy violations. All right, threat number one, AI washing. This isn't just some harmless marketing fluff anymore. The SEC is now actively treating this as a form of securities fraud. If you're telling investors your AI can do X, Y, and Z, it better be able to do X, Y, and Z. It's really that simple. Next up, algorithmic bias. This is a huge one. You can have an AI system that you think is totally objective, but if it's trained on biased historical data, guess what? It's just going to learn and amplify those same biases. And that is opening the door to some massive class action and civil rights lawsuits in everything from hiring to healthcare. And of course, data privacy. AI models are incredibly hungry for data. They need tons of it to work. But that makes your company a giant, juicy target for privacy violations under rules like Europe's GDPR or California's CCPA. The fines here aren't just a slap on the wrist. We're talking millions and millions of dollars. And look, none of this is theoretical. Let's look at some real-world examples. New York City rolled out a chatbot and started telling businesses it was okay to illegally fire people. They had to pull the whole thing. It's a perfect example of what happens when you rush to deploy without thinking through the risks. Or how about this one in healthcare? A major AI system was found to be systematically under-identifying Black patients for care management. Why? Because it was using past healthcare costs as a proxy for need, which ended up encoding systemic bias. This affected millions of patients and, you guessed it, sparked major lawsuits. And it's not just about discrimination. A real estate company's over-reliance on its AI pricing model led to catastrophic errors,
a $300 million loss, and a wave of shareholder lawsuits filed directly against the board for lack of oversight.
Okay, so you've got all these internal risks, and they're all happening inside this incredibly complex and constantly shifting global regulatory environment. There is no single rulebook to follow, which makes having strong, adaptable governance even more critical.
And you can see here, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. You've got the EU taking this very careful, risk-based approach. The US, on the other hand, is much more of a patchwork, with different rules for different sectors. And then you have China, which is really focused on algorithmic transparency. If you're a global company, you have to navigate all of this at once.
And this right here, this illustrates the fundamental challenge for every leader. The technology itself is evolving in a matter of weeks or months. But the laws, the regulations, they can take years to catch up. And that leaves this huge, risky gap where you and your company have to operate.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's this. You cannot afford to wait for the government to tell you what to do. Your job, as a board, is to get ahead of this, to proactively build your own strong governance based on best practices. Because waiting for regulatory clarity is simply a losing game.
And that really brings us to the final critical question you need to ask yourself and your board. Are you truly equipped to oversee this new frontier of risk? And what happens if you're not?
All right, that's a lot to think about. Just so you know, this has been part 4 of a 6-part overview by Virtualization Options LLC, all about AI governance. It's designed to discuss these potential legal risks and, more importantly, how to establish governance to protect yourself. Now, since every organization is unique, we do work with companies to develop custom, specific training that addresses their individual needs, risk exposure, and productivity goals. And of course, this comes with no warranty expressed or implied.